The ships appeared over Earth on a Tuesday morning, hanging in the sky like silver monuments to impossibility. Dr. Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the International Space Station, watching as the alien vessels maintained their position above the Pacific Ocean with casual grace that made human technology look like children's toys. "They're here for the meeting," her colleague, Dr. James Morrison, said, his voice tight with barely controlled excitement. The Confederation of Aligned Worlds had sent their best diplomat, a creature called Ambassador Trellix, who belonged to a species that looked like upright mantises wrapped in flowing robes of liquid metal. Sarah had studied every scrap of information. Earth's hastily assembled first contact team had gathered over the past 3 weeks since the initial transmission. The aliens seemed friendly enough, even if their attitude carried the faint whiff of condescension when Trellix materialized in the station's diplomatic chamber. The first thing that struck Sarah was how the ambassador moved with the confidence of someone visiting a backwater province. "Greetings, humans," Trellix said through the translation device that hovered near its triangular head. "We welcome you to the greater galactic community. Though we must confess surprise at finding spacefaring life on such a young world." Sarah exchanged glances with James. Young world? Earth was over 4.5 billion years old. Young? She asked. Careful. Trellix made a gesture that the translation AI interpreted as amusement. "Your star is barely middle-aged, and your planet formed only recently in cosmic terms," the ambassador explained. "Most civilizations in the Confederation hail from worlds orbiting the ancient first-generation stars, with history spanning tens of billions of years. The aliens had brought gifts, samples of their art and culture, holographic records of their civilization." Sarah spent hours examining them in the days that followed, her trained eye cataloging every detail. She had specialized in xenorchaeology even before there were aliens to study, focusing on Earth's most mysterious ancient sites. Now she found herself staring at architectural patterns in the alien records that made her skin prickle with recognition. The mathematical ratios were wrong, not incorrect, but familiar. She pulled up files from her personal database, images of structures that had puzzled archaeologists for generations. The Rechat structure in Mauritania, with its perfect concentric circles, anomalous metallic spheres found in South African mines, embedded in rock that predated complex life-strange geometric formations, detected by ground-penetrating radar beneath the Antarctic ice. When she overlaid the alien construction techniques with Earth's ancient mysteries, the patterns aligned with terrifying precision. "This can't be right," she muttered, running the analysis again. She looked over her shoulder at the screen. "What am I looking at?" "These symbols the Trellix use in their most sacred architecture," Sarah said, her finger tracing glowing lines on the display. "They match formations we found on Earth, structures we always assumed were natural geological features. Coincidence?" James suggested, but his voice carried doubt. "The mathematical probability of this level of similarity occurring naturally is astronomical," Sarah replied. She requested a meeting with Trellix. Bringing her data on a secure tablet, the ambassador received her in the observation lounge, where Earth hung like a blue jewel against the black velvet of space. "Ambassador, I've noticed some unusual correlations between your people's ancient sites and certain formations on Earth." Sarah began. Trellix's compound eyes glittered with what might have been amusement. "Dr. Chun, I mean no disrespect, but your species only achieved sentience a few 100,000 years ago," the ambassador said. "The sites you reference are from civilizations that flourished when your world was still dominated by single-celled organisms. Our dating methods are quite accurate," Sarah pressed. "Some of these Earth formations are over 2 billion years old." "Impossible," Trellix said flatly. "Even if such structures existed on your world, they would be crude natural formations. perhaps shaped by volcanic activity or tectonic processes your young geology hasn't fully cataloged. Sarah felt frustration building in her chest, but she kept her voice level. Would you be willing to examine the evidence? Trellix made that amused gesture again. Of course. Though I suspect you'll find the explanation far more mundane than you hope. Over the next week, Sarah compiled everything she could find. She pulled in colleagues from geology departments across the globe, reached out to deep-sea researchers who had mapped the ocean floor, contacted teams working in the most remote archaeological sites. The data painted a picture that shouldn't exist: isotope ratios in ancient rock that suggested industrial processes, fossilized structures buried under miles of sediment and stone trace, elements that matched the chemical signatures of the aliens' own construction materials, but in rocks that predated their civilization by billions of years. When she presented her findings to a hastily assembled committee that included both human scientists and alien observers, the room fell silent. A Trolloc scientist named Vexener, who specialized in geological analysis, examined the data with increasing agitation. These readings must be contaminated, Vexener insisted. No contamination could affect samples from hundreds of different sites across all 7 continents, countered Dr. Rebecca Armstrong, Earth's leading geochemist. The pattern is consistent. Another alien, a floating jellyfish-like being from a species called the Quor, spoke through burbling translation. If these findings are accurate, they suggest technological activity on Earth during periods when our oldest civilizations were not yet spacefaring. They suggest technological activity on Earth before your civilizations existed at all. Sarah corrected quietly. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. Relics, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. The Confederation must verify these claims independently, the ambassador announced. We will send our best geological and archaeological teams to examine your world personally. Sarah nodded, though a strange feeling settled in her stomach, something about the way the aliens had gone quiet, the way their various forms of body language all suggested the same thing: fear. Within days, ships began arriving in Earth orbit, vessels carrying scientists from a dozen different species. They descended on archaeological sites like a swarm, bringing equipment that made human technology look primitive. Sarah accompanied one team to the Richard structure, watching as they deployed scanners that could read atomic structures through hundreds of meters of rock. The head researcher, a bear-like creature named Gore, studied the results with growing disbelief. This stone was quarried, Gore said slowly, cut with precision tools and placed in these patterns deliberately. We've always suspected that, Sarah replied, but when? Gore's translator carried a note of distress. Your geological surveys date this formation to approximately 600 million years ago, during your Ediacaran period. That's correct. Gore turned to look at her with eyes that held an emotion Sarah couldn't quite identify. Dr. Chun, my people's oldest archaeological site dates back 12 million years, the alien said. The Trellix claim sites of 100 million years, which we've always found suspicious. What are you saying? I'm saying that whatever built this was here before any of us, Gore replied. Before any civilization we know of existed anywhere in the galaxy. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet, though she stood perfectly still across the globe. Other teams were making similar discoveries. Each report that came in painted the same impossible picture. Earth wasn't young, Earth was ancient, and someone had been here, building things, shaping the world, when the rest of the galaxy was empty of intelligent life. The question that nobody wanted to ask. The question that Sarah could see forming behind the eyes of every scientist, human and alien alike, was simple and terrifying. If Earth was the ancient world, if civilizations had risen here billions of years ago, then what happened to them? And what did that make humanity? 3 months after first contact, Sarah Chen stood in a laboratory deep beneath the Swiss Alps, staring at results that made her question everything she thought she knew about human history. The evidence had piled up like snow in an avalanche, each piece adding weight to a conclusion that seemed impossible. "Run it again," she told her assistant. Knowing the results wouldn't change, but needing to see them one more time, Dr. Marcus Webb, newly appointed head of Earth's Deep Time Research Initiative, entered the lab with a delegation of alien scientists trailing behind him. Marcus was a former military commander who had transitioned to scientific administration, and he carried himself with the calm authority of someone used to making decisions under pressure. "Show them," he said simply. Sarah brought up the holographic display, filling the room with floating images and data streams. "We've analyzed over 400 distinct sites across Earth," she began. "What we're seeing is consistent with a global technological civilization that existed approximately 2 billion years ago." A Trellick scientist named Kelvar made a dismissive gesture. "You're reading natural geological processes and seeing patterns because you want them to be there." "Then explain the Bimini Road," Sarah countered, pulling up new images. Underwater formations off the Bahamas that show clear signs of deliberate placement, dated to the Proterozoic eon. "Explain the metallic spheres found in South African pyrophyllite deposits," Dr. Armstrong added, stepping forward. "Spheres with perfect grooves around their circumference, found in rock dated to 28 billion years ago. Your dating must be wrong." "Kelvar," insisted. Sarah shook her head. "We've used multiple independent methods: radiometric dating, stratigraphic analysis, paleomagnetism, and techniques your own people verified as accurate. The dates are solid." Marcus confirmed. "But there's more." He nodded to Sarah, who pulled up a new set of data. "We've been comparing the chemical signatures from these ancient Earth sites with samples from your homeworlds," Sarah explained. "The trace elements, the isotope ratios, the manufacturing markers left behind by industrial processes." The holographic display shifted, showing molecular structures rotating in three-dimensional space. The construction materials used in the most ancient Trellick sites contain specific isotope ratios. Sarah continued. "These ratios are like fingerprints, unique to the time and place of manufacture." She overlaid another data set. "We found matching ratios in terrestrial rock formations that predate your civilization by 19 billion years." The room went silent. Kelvar's translator device made a sound like static. "That's not possible," the alien finally said. "The Trellick's homeworld is 15,000 light years from Earth, and my people only achieved spaceflight 3 million years ago." "We know," Marcus said quietly, "which means either your people were somehow here billions of years before you existed, or someone else was using the same construction techniques." A core scientist named Bilsha floated forward, its translucent body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep thought. "There is a third possibility," Bilsha said, "that the techniques themselves are older than any of our civilizations, and we all inherited them from the same source." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had been thinking the same thing but hadn't wanted to voice it. "The progenitor myth," Marcus said. Every alien in the room reacted, their various forms of body language all showing the same thing: uncomfortable recognition. Every spacefaring species has some version of the story. Bilsha explained. For the humans, the first ones, the ancients, the Cedar civilizations separated by thousands of light years, all share legends of beings who came before, who shaped the galaxy and then vanished. We always assumed it was convergent mythology. Kelvar added, "Species naturally create origin stories to explain their existence. What if it wasn't a myth?" Sarah asked. The next discovery came from a deep mining operation in Siberia. Workers Drilling for mineral samples 3 miles below the surface hit something that their equipment couldn't penetrate. The Russian government contacted the Deep Time Initiative, and within days, Marcus had assembled a team. Sarah descended into the Earth in a reinforced elevator cage. The temperature rising with each meter of depth, the rock around her was ancient, compressed by unimaginable weight over billions of years at the bottom. In a cavern carved out by the mining equipment, a perfectly smooth metallic surface reflected the harsh LED work lights. "It's a vault," Marcus said, running scanners across the surface. The metal isn't corroded, isn't damaged, shows no signs of age whatsoever. "How is that possible?" Sarah asked. "The rock surrounding it was molten when this was placed here," Marcus replied, showing her the geological analysis. "Someone put this vault in place and then let the magma cool around it, sealing it for eternity. The alien scientists worked alongside the humans, deploying technologies that could scan through the vault's walls without opening it. What they found inside defied explanation. Data storage devices, constructed from materials that remain stable over geological timescales. "We need to open it," Sarah said. Marcus hesitated. "Once we do, there's no going back," he warned. "Whatever's inside could change everything we think we know." "Everything we think we know is already changing," Sarah replied. They cut through the vault door using a laser system designed by the Trollocs, a process that took 6 hours and revealed a chamber filled with crystalline structures that hummed with stored energy. The data cores were unlike anything human or alien technology and produced when Sarah touched one. Information flooded into her mind, not as words or images, but as pure understanding. She gasped and pulled back. "Are you all right?" Marcus gripped her shoulder. "I could read it," Sarah whispered. "I touched it, and I understood what it was saying." "That's impossible," Kelver said. "You have no context for alien languages, no framework for understanding." "It's not alien," Sarah interrupted. "It's human, or something close enough that my brain recognized it instinctively." They brought in linguistics experts, neurologists, computer scientists. Each human who touched the data cores reported the same thing: immediate, intuitive understanding. The aliens couldn't read them at all. Over the following weeks, they extracted the information carefully, translating the intuitive understanding into words and images that could be shared. The story that emerged was fragmentary, damaged by time even the cores makers couldn't fully prevent, but the pieces that remained told a tale of a civilization that had spanned the galaxy, reshaping worlds to their will. They called themselves the Shapers, though Sarah's mind insisted on translating it as something more familiar. The progenitors. They had been masters of genetic engineering, terraforming, stellar manipulation. They had seeded hundreds of worlds with life, carefully designed ecosystems that would evolve and flourish. "Why?" Dr. Armstrong asked, studying the translated records. "Why go to all that effort?" "The files don't say," Marcus replied. "But there are references to a project, something called the Seeding Initiative." Sarah pulled up genetic data that the cores had contained, comparing it with samples from the alien species. "Look at this," she said, highlighting specific sequences. Every spacefaring species in the Confederation shares these genetic markers, signs of deliberate engineering buried in your DNA. "We were created?" Vilsha's bioluminescence flickered with distress. "Not created. Guided," Sarah corrected. "The progenitors took existing life and nudged it in specific directions. Accelerated evolution, ensured that intelligence would emerge. But why?" Kelvar, demanded Marcus, pulled up another file, one that made his face go pale. "Because they needed you," he said quietly. "There are references here to a threat, something they encountered in the dark between galaxies. They were preparing defenses," Sarah realized, seeing the pattern. The Seeding Initiative wasn't about exploration or preservation. It was about creating a galaxy-wide defense network. A network made of living beings, Bilsha added, horror creeping into its translated voice. The implications settled over the room like a heavy blanket. The progenitors had shaped the evolution of life across the galaxy for a purpose, turning entire species into weapons against some unimaginable threat. There's more, Marcus said, his voice tight. The cores contain genetic data from the progenitors themselves, templates showing what they were. He brought up the information, and Sarah felt her breath catch. The base genetic structure was eerily familiar, similar to dozens of Earth species, but with a pattern that matched human DNA more closely than it should. It's not a perfect match, she said, studying the double helix rotating in the holographic display, but it's close. Closer than it should be for a species that existed 2 billion years ago. Unless, Marcus said slowly, we're not looking at a distant ancestor, unless we're looking at ourselves. Sarah finished. The room erupted in protests from the alien scientists. But Sarah barely heard them. She was staring at the genetic data, seeing the truth written in base pairs and amino acid sequences. Humanity wasn't descended from the progenitors. Humanity was the progenitors, or the closest thing to them that still existed. Evolved and changed by 2 billion years, but carrying the original template in there. DNA. Earth hadn't been just another seeded world. Earth had been home. The news spread through the Confederation like a virus, infecting every conversation, every policy debate, every quiet moment when beings looked up at the stars and wondered what it meant to exist. Sarah watched from Earth as the galactic community began to fracture. Some species embraced the revelation, seeing purpose in their engineered origins. Others raged against it, feeling violated by the knowledge that their evolution had been guided by ancient hands. But the most common reaction was fear. They're calling us the inheritors, Marcus said, joining Sarah on the observation deck where she spent most of her time now, watching ships come and go from Earth orbit. Some species want to worship us, he continued. Others want to quarantine the entire solar system. And what do you want? Sarah asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I want to understand what happened to them, he finally said. The progenitors were advanced enough to reshape the galaxy, and something destroyed them so completely that their existence became myth. Sarah had been thinking about that constantly. The data cores contained fragments of the progenitors' final days, but the records were incomplete, corrupted by time and what looked like deliberate deletion. Whatever they faced, they chose to hide rather than fight, she said. They had weapons that could crack planets, technologies we still can't understand. And they ran, or they sacrificed themselves, Marcus suggested. The seeding initiative started right before the civilization collapsed. Like they knew what was coming. A new team had been analyzing human genetics, led by Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the Tokyo Institute of Advanced Biology. Yuki had discovered something that the preliminary scans had missed: the junk DNA. Yuki explained at the emergency conference, called to discuss her findings. The 98% of human genetic code that doesn't seem to code for anything. We've always assumed it was evolutionary leftovers. Random mutations accumulated over millions of years. She brought up a holographic display showing the complex spirals of human chromosomes. But when we compare human junk DNA to the samples from other Confederation species, there's a striking difference, Yuki continued. Their non-coding DNA is truly random. Exactly what you'd expect from natural evolution. And ours? Marcus asked. Ours is structured, Yuki said. Hidden in the junk DNA are what appear to be compressed data files. Genetic storage of information that's been passed down through every generation since the progenitors. The room fell silent. You're saying our DNA contains memories from 2 billion years ago? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Not memories exactly, Yuki clarified. More like potential memories. Information that could be accessed under the right conditions. What conditions? Kelvar demanded from the alien section of the conference. Yuki hesitated. We're not sure. But there's been an increase in unusual neurological activity among humans who have spent significant time examining progenitor artifacts. Sarah felt a chill. She had been having dreams lately. Vivid and strange. Visions of cities that couldn't exist and technologies that defied physics. How many humans are affected? Marcus asked. Thousands, Yuki replied. And the number is growing, particularly among those who work directly with the recovered data cores. Sarah raised her hand slowly. I've been having them too, she admitted. Dreams of watching continents drift, of ice covering lands that are now deserts, of ships that fold space like paper around the room. Other human scientists nodded. Marcus looked at Sarah with concern. What else do you see? Fire, Sarah said quietly. I see fire falling from the sky. And I see us, the progenitors, making a choice. The Confederation sent a medical team to study the affected humans. What they found terrified them. The genetic triggers are activating, Dr. Bilsha reported. The core scientist's bioluminescence flickering with agitation. Exposure to progenitor technology is causing dormant genetic sequences to express, unlocking information that's been stored for billions of years. Is it dangerous? Marcus asked. We don't know, Dosha admitted. The humans showing activation seem healthy, but they're accessing knowledge that shouldn't exist in modern minds. It's not knowledge, Sarah corrected. She had spent the last week in isolation, documenting every dream, every flash of inherited memory. It's more like remembering skills I never learned, understanding concepts without being taught. She demonstrated by writing complex mathematical equations on a holographic board, formulas that describe the physics of faster-than-light travel. I don't know how I know this, she said, but when I write it, it feels right. Like remembering how to ride a bicycle. The implications were staggering. If humans could access progenitor knowledge through genetic memory, they might be able to recover technologies lost for billions of years. But Sarah's dreams also contained warnings. They found something, she told Marcus in private, out in the dark between galaxies. The progenitors discovered something that shouldn't exist. What was it? Marcus asked. Sarah shook her head. The memories are fragmented, but whatever it was old. Older than the universe should allow. That's impossible. So is everything else we've learned. Sarah replied. The archaeological teams continued their work on Earth, uncovering layer after layer of evidence 3 miles below the Antarctic ice. They found the remains of a city. The structures were impossibly preserved, protected by the same technology that had kept the Siberian vault intact. The Chen led the expedition into the frozen ruins. The city had been beautiful once. Towers of crystalline material that generated their own power. Transportation systems that moved without visible mechanisms. This was a progenitor city, Marcus said with certainty, and they abandoned it deliberately, Sarah added, pointing to signs of systematic evacuation. Look, no bodies, no personal possessions left behind. Everything valuable was taken. They found a central chamber that contained more data cores. These ones still active, humming with energy after billions of years. When Sarah touched them, the flood of information nearly overwhelmed her. She saw the progenitor civilization at its height. A golden age of exploration and creation. She saw them discover the anomaly, a region of space where the laws of physics behave strangely. She saw them send ships to investigate, and she saw what those ships found. It's alive, Sarah gasped, pulling away from the core. The thing they found. It's not a weapon or a natural phenomenon. It's a living entity. That's impossible, Kelvar said. Nothing could survive in intergalactic space. This thing doesn't survive in space, Sarah replied. Space exists in it or around it, or because of it. The memories don't translate well. She struggled to put the images into words. The progenitors realized they had made a terrible mistake, Sarah continued, by investigating the entity. They had drawn its attention. What did it do? Marcus asked. It started feeding, Sarah said. The progenitor's advanced technology, their manipulation of fundamental forces. It all produced energy signatures that attracted the entity, like ringing a dinner bell. Yuki suggested. Sarah nodded. They couldn't fight it directly because every weapon they used just attracted it more. So they seeded the galaxy with new life. Marcus realized life that would develop technology slowly, naturally, without the massive energy signatures the progenitors used. A trap, Dosha said softly. They turned the entire galaxy into a trap. Sarah pulled up the final memories from the data core. The progenitors encoded their knowledge into hundreds of species across thousands of worlds, she explained. Each species was given specific genetic programming, instructions that would activate if the entity ever returned. Instructions to do what? Kelvar asked, though fear already colored the translation. To become weapons. Sarah said, living weapons that would recognize the entity and instinctively know how to fight it. The room erupted in chaos as the alien scientists realized what she was saying. They weren't just descended from progenitor seeding programs, they were biological weapons, designed to activate and destroy a threat so terrible it had forced the most advanced civilization in galactic history to commit species-wide suicide. But humans are different, Marcus said, cutting through the noise. We don't have the same genetic programming. No, Sarah agreed. The progenitors kept Earth pure, free from the contamination. Why? Vilsha demanded. Sarah looked at the data core, accessing the last fragmented memories. Because they needed a backup, she said quietly. If the trap failed, if the entity destroyed all the weapon species, Earth would still be here, carrying the pure progenitor genetic line. A seed bank, Marcus said. The last hope for rebuilding. Sarah nodded. Feeling the weight of 2 billion years pressing down on her shoulders, humanity wasn't just related to the progenitors. Humanity was the progenitors' final legacy. Their last desperate attempt to ensure that something of their civilization would survive. And now, by achieving spaceflight and making contact with the Confederation, humanity had announced to the universe that Earth was awake once more. The question that terrified Sarah, the question that kept her awake through long nights of fragmentary dreams and inherited memories, was simple. Had they just rung the dinner bell again? Sarah woke from another dream. Screening Marcus found her in the medical bay at 3 a.m., hooked up to monitoring equipment that showed her brain activity spiking in patterns that shouldn't be possible. It's getting worse, she said, her voice hoarse. Every time I sleep, I remember more. Dr. Tanaka adjusted the neural scanner, studying the readouts with a mixture of fascination and concern. Your brain is forming new connections, Yuki explained. Pathways that access the genetic data stored in your DNA. It's like watching evolution happen in real time. Can you stop it? Marcus asked. I don't think she wants us to, Yuki replied. Looking at Sarah, Sarah shook her head. The memories are important, she said. They're trying to tell me something the progenitors needed us to know. She wasn't alone across Earth. Thousands of humans reported similar experiences. Scientists, engineers, archaeologists, anyone who had spent significant time studying progenitor artifacts found themselves accessing inherited memories. The phenomenon spread like wildfire. Construction worker in Beijing touched a fragment of progenitor metal recovered from a deep mine and suddenly understood principles of quantum engineering. A teacher in São Paulo walked past a museum exhibit and experienced a flash of memory showing stellar manipulation techniques. A child in Mumbai drew pictures of cities that matched the Antarctic ruins with perfect accuracy. Despite never seeing photographs, the Confederation watched with growing alarm. This is unprecedented, Ambassador Trellick said at an emergency session of the Galactic Council. An entire species spontaneously accessing genetic memory, gaining knowledge that took our civilizations millions of years to develop. They're not gaining knowledge, Kelvar argued. They're remembering it. There's a difference, is there? A reptilian delegate named Tar hissed. If humans can access progenitor technology through inherited memory, they'll surpass all of us within a generation. Maybe that's the point. Marcus said he had been invited to address the council. The first human to do so. The progenitors designed Earth as a backup, a reserve population that could rebuild their civilization if needed. And now that need may have arrived. Bosha added the council chamber fell into uncomfortable silence. 3 months after the genetic activation began, Sarah led an expedition to a site in the Sahara Desert, where ground-penetrating radar had detected massive structures beneath the sand. The memories had told her what to look for. They found it 50 meters down, a facility that had been buried by shifting dunes over hundreds of millions of years, unlike the Antarctic city. This place had been deliberately hidden, wrapped in stealth technology that even now made it difficult to detect. It's a library, Sarah said as they entered the main chamber. Walls of data cores stretched into darkness, billions of them, each containing fragments of progenitor knowledge. This is what they wanted us to find. Marcus realized. All the knowledge they couldn't encode into DNA, everything they needed to pass down but couldn't fit into genetic memory. Sarah approached the central archive. Guided by instincts she didn't fully understand when she interfaced with the system. The flood of information was overwhelming. She saw the progenitors' complete history, from their evolution on Earth billions of years ago to their desperate final days. She saw them develop technologies that would seem like magic to modern science. Matter replication, temporal manipulation, consciousness transfer. She saw them spread across the galaxy, reshaping hundreds of worlds, creating ecosystems that would one day produce intelligent life. And she saw them make their fatal mistake. They thought they could study anything, Sarah said, her voice distant as she processed the memories. The progenitors believed that with enough knowledge, enough technology, nothing in the universe could threaten them. Pride, Marcus said softly. The same pride that's destroyed civilizations throughout human history. Sarah nodded. They found the entity in a region of space where 2 galaxies had collided billions of years ago. She continued. The collision had created exotic matter, strange physics that shouldn't exist. And the entity lived there? Yuki asked. The entity was created there, Sarah corrected. Or maybe it created itself. The progenitors never fully understood. She accessed deeper memories. Wincing as the information burned through her consciousness, they sent research ships, deployed probes, tried to understand what they were looking at. Sarah explained. Each investigation drew the entity's attention more strongly. What did it want? Kelvar asked the alien scientist to join the expedition, driven by a need to understand what their ancestors had been designed to fight. Nothing, Sarah replied. It didn't want anything because wanting requires consciousness, requires desire. Then what was it? Marcus demanded. Sarah struggled to find words for concepts that didn't translate properly. Imagine a fundamental force like gravity or electromagnetism, she said. Now imagine if that force could think, could react to stimuli, could learn. That's impossible, Kelvar insisted. So is everything else we've discovered. Sarah shot back. She continued accessing the archive, piecing together the progenitors' final strategy. They realized conventional weapons were useless. She explained. Every time they attacked the entity, it adapted, learned, grew stronger. So they changed tactics, Marcus said. Following her reasoning, they stopped trying to destroy it and started trying to contain it. Sarah nodded. The seeding initiative wasn't just about creating weapons. It was about creating a living cage. She pulled up holographic displays showing the distribution of seeded worlds across the galaxy. The pattern was deliberate. almost geometric. Each seeded species was placed at specific coordinates, Yuki observed, like nodes in a network. Bilsha added, their bioluminescence pulsing with realization, a network that would activate if the entity ever tried to enter the galaxy. Sarah confirmed, the genetic programming in each species would trigger, transforming them into living components of a vast defensive array. Transform us how? Kelvar's voice carried horror. Sarah accessed the relevant data, though part of her wished she hadn't. Your DNA contains encoded instructions for rapid evolutionary changes, she explained. If the entity is detected, those instructions activate, forcing your species to develop specific biological capabilities. What? Capabilities? The alien scientist pressed. Energy absorption, quantum field manipulation, consciousness networking. Sarah listed. Each species was designed to develop different abilities that would work together to trap and neutralize the entity. We're not weapons, Kelvar said. We're components of a weapon. Yes. Sarah agreed simply. The horror of it settled over the expedition team. Every spacefaring species in the galaxy existed as part of an ancient trap. Biological mechanisms designed to activate and transform if a specific threat emerged. But humans are different. Marcus said again, why didn't the progenitors program us the same way? Sarah accessed the final layer of the archive, the deepest memories that the progenitors had left behind. Because someone needed to remember, she said quietly, the weapon species would transform completely, losing their original nature in the process. Even if they survived the fight, they wouldn't be the same civilizations afterward. So Earth was insurance. Yuki realized, a population that could rebuild galactic civilization after the battle was over. Sarah nodded. But there was more. The progenitors also didn't know if the trap would work. She admitted. They were making contingency plans on top of contingency plans. She pulled up the final set of data, coordinates scattered across the galaxy, pointing to hidden facilities like the one they stood in. They built weapons caches, Marcus said, studying the locations. Real weapons. Technologies that could fight the entity directly. Weapons that could only be activated by someone with pure progenitor DNA. Sarah added, someone like a human. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just a backup population. They were the failsafe. The last line of defense if the seeding initiative failed. There's something else, Sarah said. Her voice troubled. She accessed a memory that made her stomach turn. The progenitors knew the entity would be attracted to high-energy civilization. She explained. That's why they designed the seeded species to develop slowly, naturally. But humans develop faster. Yuki said, we went from agriculture to spaceflight in just 10,000 years. Sarah nodded. Because we weren't designed to stay hidden forever. She said, the genetic programming in human DNA includes triggers for rapid development. Why would they want that? Marcus asked. Though dread was creeping into his voice, Sarah met his eyes. Because the trap had a time limit. She said, the entity is patient. But it's also persistent. Eventually, it would find a way into the galaxy. And when it did, the weapon species needed to be ready. You're saying humanity's rapid development was deliberate? Kelvar asked. I'm saying we were designed to ring the dinner bell. Sarah replied. The expedition team stood in shocked silence. Humanity's entire history, from the first cities to the space age, had been guided by genetic programming designed to announce Earth's presence to the universe at exactly the right moment. Right. Moment for what? Marcus asked. Sarah pulled up the final memory. The last message the progenitors had encoded into the archive. It showed a timeline, carefully calculated projections of when the entity would overcome its containment. The revelation shattered the Confederation. Within weeks of learning, they were designed. Weapons with built-in transformation triggers. Dozens of species began demanding answers that nobody could provide. Some embraced their purpose, seeing divine meaning in their creation. The Zealots of Purpose, as they called themselves, argued that the progenitors had given them the ultimate gift, a reason to exist. Others formed the Liberation Front, rejecting their programmed nature and demanding the right to choose their own destiny. Few species simply collapsed into despair. Their entire understanding of identity and free will destroyed. Sarah watched it all from Earth. Feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders, she had been the one to uncover the truth. And now the galaxy was tearing itself apart. "We have to tell them about the timeline," Marcus said. They stood in the United Earth Council chambers, preparing to address not just humanity, but the entire Confederation. If we reveal that the entity is coming in less than 50 years, it could cause complete panic, Dr. Armstrong argued. And if we don't tell them, we're condemning billions of beings to die unprepared. Marcus countered. Sarah remained silent, lost in memories that weren't hers. The progenitors had faced this same choice. She realized tell the truth and risk chaos, or hide the information and hope for the best. They had chosen to hide it, encoding the knowledge so deep that only their direct descendants could access it. That decision had bought them time, but it had also ensured that when the truth finally emerged, nobody would be ready. "We tell them everything," Sarah said finally. "All of it. The timeline, the weapon caches, the transformation protocols. That will cause chaos." Ambassador Trellix warned the diplomat had remained on Earth, helping to coordinate the Confederation's response. "Chaos is already here," Sarah replied. "At least if they know the truth, they can make informed choices." The broadcast went out across the galaxy simultaneously, transmitted to every world in the Confederation. Sarah stood before the cameras, flanked by Marcus and the leaders of Earth's major governments. 50 years ago, the progenitors calculated that their containment of the entity would fail approximately 50 years after their descendants achieved faster-than-light capability. She began. "We achieved FTL 6 months ago." The words hung in the air, like a death sentence, but the progenitors left us tools to fight back, Marcus added, pulling up displays showing the weapons cache locations, hidden facilities across the galaxy containing technologies designed to combat the entity directly. Technologies that can only be activated by human DNA. Sarah continued, "Because we carry the progenitor genetic template." She paused, letting that sink in. The progenitors designed a galaxy-wide defense system with humanity as the key. Sarah explained. "They gave us the knowledge, the weapons, and the authority to activate everything they built, by rights of succession, by genetic inheritance, by every law of the ancient world," Marcus said. "Earth is the rightful inheritor of the progenitor empire." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Some species demanded that humanity assume leadership, arguing that only the inheritors could coordinate the coming defense. Others accused Earth of staging an elaborate coup, using progenitor artifacts to justify seizing power. The Zealots of Purpose declared humanity to be living gods, blessed by the progenitors themselves. The Liberation Front called for humans to be quarantined, their genetic advantage too dangerous to allow free movement through the galaxy. Through it all, Sarah felt sick. This wasn't what she wanted. She was a scientist, not an empress, but the data was clear. Only human DNA could access the deepest progenitor systems. Only humans could activate the ancient weapons, unless there was another way. Dr. Tanaka made the breakthrough 3 weeks into the crisis. "The genetic lock isn't absolute," Yuki explained, showing Sarah the results of her research. "It's sophisticated, yes, but it's still just a biological recognition system. Can we break it?" Sarah asked. "Better," Yuki replied. "We can share it." She pulled up genetic sequences, showing the specific markers that allowed humans to interface with progenitor technology. "If we can isolate these sequences and introduce them into other species' DNA, they could access the systems too." Yuki explained. Gene therapy on a galactic scale. Sarah breathed. It would take years. Yuki warned. Maybe decades to treat every species. And there would be risks, but it would work? Marcus asked, in theory. Yuki confirmed. Sarah sat back. Her mind racing. They could share the progenitor inheritance. Distribute the power across the entire Confederation. It would mean giving up humanity's unique advantage. Surrendering the authority that genetic inheritance gave them. There's a problem. Kelvar said the Trellic scientist had been working with Yuki on the genetic research. The transformation protocols in the weapon species DNA. Kelvar continued. We've been studying them. Trying to understand how they work, and? Marcus prompted. They're degrading, Kelvar said. The genetic programming was designed to remain stable for billions of years. But it assumed the species would remain relatively unchanged. Evolution has corrupted the code, Yuki realized. Exactly. Kelvar confirmed. Some species retain maybe 60% functionality. Others as low as 30%. Will that be enough when the entity arrives? Sarah asked. We don't know. Kelvar admitted. The progenitor records suggest the defense network needs at least 80% functionality to work properly. Sarah felt her heart sink. The ancient trap was broken. Degraded by billions of years of natural evolution, even if every species accepted their role as living weapons, they might not be able to activate properly. But if we introduce the progenitor genetic markers to repair the transformation protocols, Yuki said slowly, thinking it through, we could restore functionality while also giving them access to the weapon systems. Killing two birds with one stone, Marcus said. More like saving two galaxies with one treatment. Sarah corrected. The proposal went to the United Earth Council first. The debate lasted for days. Some argued that humanity should maintain its genetic advantage, using their unique status to lead the galaxy through the coming crisis. Others insisted that sharing the progenitor inheritance was the only ethical choice. General Jiang Wei, commander of Earth's military forces, spoke against the plan. We're talking about giving up the only leverage humanity has. He argued, once every species can access progenitor technology, what's to stop them from turning those weapons against us? The same thing that stops us from using them against each other now. Sarah replied, the knowledge that we face a common enemy. Idealism won't save us when the entity arrives. Jiang countered, neither will tyranny. Sarah shot back. The progenitors tried to control everything, to engineer the perfect solution, and it failed. We can't repeat their mistakes. The vote was close, agonizingly so in the end. Humanity chose to share. The Genetic Inheritance Initiative launched 6 months after the timeline revelation teams of human and alien scientists worked together, synthesizing the progenitor genetic markers and developing delivery methods. It was the largest medical project in galactic history. Not everyone accepted the treatment. The Liberation Front argued it was another form of genetic manipulation. The progenitors controlling them from beyond the grave. A faction of humanity called the Purists rejected the entire premise, insisting that Earth should reclaim its rightful place as masters of the galaxy. They stole data from the Sahara archive, copied the locations of weapon caches, and disappeared into the frontier regions. We'll deal with them later, Marcus said, though his voice carried doubt. Right now, we have bigger problems. The weapons caches were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Sarah led the first expedition to activate one, a facility hidden in a nebula 4,000 light-years from Earth. When human DNA interfaced with the activation systems, the entire structure came alive. Weapons that could disrupt space-time itself, shields that existed in 11 dimensions, ships that moved by thinking themselves into new locations. This is incredible, Bilsha said, the core scientist's bioluminescence blazing with excitement. This is terrifying. Sarah corrected. She had accessed the weapons manuals through genetic memory, understanding instinctively how to use technologies that should take lifetimes to master. The power was intoxicating, and that scared her more than anything. The progenitors had all of this, she said quietly, and it still wasn't enough. The galaxy spent the next years preparing species that accepted the genetic treatment, began training for the transformation, learning to control abilities that their DNA would force upon them. The Confederation reformed itself into something new. Not a hierarchical empire, but a true alliance of equals, and humanity, for the first time in their history, worked alongside other species as partners rather than competitors. But Sarah's dreams grew darker. The inherited memories showed her more of the entity. Fragmentary glimpses that made her wake up screaming. It wasn't evil. She realized evil required intent, malice, choice. The entity simply was a fundamental aspect of reality that consumed energy the way black holes consume matter. And it was patient 23 years after the timeline revelation. Long-range sensors detected anomalies in the intergalactic void. The entity was moving. "We have less time than the progenitors calculated," Marcus said. "Studying the data, maybe 25 years instead of 50. Then we work faster," Sarah replied.